Hello, this is Michelle from Dasami Publishing with our newest episode of Dasami Bookworm Podcast. I am very delighted and excited to be chatting with Trinity-Rose Crane today, the author of the Hell series and newest book coming out, Hell Sacrifice. Welcome, Trinity-Rose.
Hi, how are you
Thank
doing?
you. Thank you so much for joining us with the chat today. We'll talk about a few things in young authors, but let's start off with the books themselves. It's the third book. We published your first one at 16, the second one at 17, and now, as I put it, an ancient 19, your third book in the trilogy. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about published author of three books?
I'm very surprised and very happy with it. Um, I think having three books published, I'm very shocked, but I'm also very grateful. Um, I think I really want to write more books in the future because um, just being able to hold them and see them has definitely made it more real for me, especially considering I started writing when I was 12. Um, Seeing how far I've come, quite nice.
And you see the progression and the change and such. So you started very, very young at writing them. Now, what interests me, what I love about the books is the point of view of the characters. There's always several characters. The transition is quite simple from the point of view. You do that well. What made you decide to write from the first person point of view and to do it with multiple characters?
I simply decided that because I like writing from a first person point of view because I feel like you connect more with the characters as you're hearing it from them specifically. And I decided multiple point of view just because you get to hear multiple characters' point of views and then you can kind of see how each of them are thinking and how it's all different, especially if they're on opposing sides. Like the first book, you had Sylvan, who was the enemy, and Abby, who is the hero, and you got to see how both of them were planning and maybe give sympathy to both of them.
It gives an insight from because you're looking at that from their point of view, where it comes from, point of view,
Yeah.
which gives it a more personal feeling. And I really like the way you handle the transition between the point of view. There's enough to understand that they're in the same scene, but it's not too much, with it because you get that taste of the difference in the character already. How did the Who was the first personality character that you created for the series?
This is my first character was Alex. She's actually the reason I made this series because I invented her character before I even had a plot or anything. I just came up with her one day and I loved her so much that I was like, I have to create a book series just for you.
And what a personality she is. We The illustration that Holly did for Alex is still, I love lots in the new book, but that's still my favorite. When you see her with the wings and the illustration, it's just absolutely so dynamic and so wonderful. Now, with the character, so Alex was first, and then who came next? How did the characters develop? Who was it, Abby
Well,
or Colt or Enzo?
I would say Enzo was next on the list for creating characters, and then it was Abby because I couldn't write the story without her. So I started like making ideas for a book, and I was like, I need someone like Abby in the book. So yeah.
Now, this comes to the very next question I wanted to ask you. How do you work? What is your process in creating the story? You have the characters. Do you just kind of write the story itself, or do you do an outline? How is it? What is your writer's process?
My writing process is well, I started with the character Alex and created just like a little story with her, just to kind of tell how a story would go and how I would plot it. And then I wrote a story outline first, and then it just went on from there.
Hmm. When you write the stories and you're writing the characters, do you see the characters in your head?
Yeah, I do, and I love like I can see them doing the actions as I'm writing it, and I love that experience.
Like a movie in your head. It's wonderful.
Yes, exactly.
That's how I read your books. It's like a movie running in my head.
Yeah.
Now, for the writing process, you've done that. When do you have a part that's the difficult part of writing for you that's a little bit more challenging?
I'd say the most difficult part for me would be the when you're writing the first draft and you're trying to plot the book, and if you get stuck, if I get stuck, I can spend like a week just sat there wanting to write, thinking of other things my characters could be doing, but I'm just stuck on one thing in the middle. That's the most difficult for me.
And how do you break that? How does that writer's block, how do you break that writer's block?
I try out different ideas, or I just kind of step away, and I will sometimes even just skip that specific scene or whatever I'm working on then, and come back to it later because I always like figure it out if I'm not fully focused on it. So I've got distractions.
I think you've pointed out, Trinity-Rose, one of the key things that everybody says is that when you can't, if you can't focus or it won't come to you, if you step away and go to a completely different circumstance or watch a movie, go for a walk, do something that's completely different, then it tends to release the brain and release the mind and the creativity to it. I think when we focus on something too much, that's where the difficulty lies. Now, what is the most enjoyable part of your writing?
It's got to be the first draft where you're meeting all the new characters and you don't know where it's going to go. And it's just a completely new experience and it's very exciting.
It's your characters are all so different, obviously, because Hell series, Hell's involved, so we've got some really bad characters in there, and you've got your protagonists, and of course Abby and her sister are really important. Um, Alex, Enzo, Flint, different characters from different books. Do you have a favorite character?
Great. That's such a difficult question.
Yes.
It's a very difficult question because it changes depending the book. Because I always swore Alex was my favorite, especially through the first two. But with this prequel, I've got to say Tina has now won my heart over, and she's now my favorite.
Oh, see, that's the thing. Children might have a favorite for a while, but you've created them, so I think that makes. I think you're allowed. Uh, we'll be chatting with Holly about working, about the illustrations in a different episode. But tell me, how has it been for you working with Holly as the illustrator for this series?
Oh, I absolutely love it because we kind of bounce off ideas of each other, and I create these elaborate storyboards, and she just understands completely how I see them in my head and illustrates them perfectly onto paper, exactly how I imagine them. And I just love seeing them actually like in a visual other than just in my head.
When they actually come to life. And
Yeah.
they do act, it is. I'm going to go back to Alex again, the one where she's, in full um, wing mode, and you see her coming down and rescuing and such. And she's so powerful, and you feel that, and all of the detail that's in it. It's absolutely amazing. So, has there been one that I know in the progression of 3 years, the relationship would have, become stronger working together? Is there an illustration that was that you came up with where you didn't really, it doesn't work quite well? And is there one where you from what I understand, you created, she created such a fantastic illustration, you had to include it.
Um, yeah, uh, the one I had to include it was she created Enzo as a dragon. And I'd never planned that to be any part of my book, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, I have to have that in my book. So I created a scene where it would happen just so I could have that illustration in there.
Oh, wow. That's I think Enzo's one of my favorite characters in the book. There's just something because of his history and you know so much about him and what they've been through. It is he is a fascinating character, so it's good with that one. What was the one that was most difficult to create from the standpoint of the writer? I know we've got scenes of hell and we've got some of those really ugly characters in there. Was there one that was more challenging to think about when you were creating your storyboard?
Um, I think the most difficult for us was creating the covers and wanting to have them very perfect because, of course, they had to have similarities throughout them all. But Holly had such great ideas and it fitted together quite well. But I think that's the one we got most stuck on.
The colors are so different. How did you arrive at the colors for the series?
Well, we kind of did it based on what colors fit like the main character as such. For example, for this one, Hell Sacrifice, Alex is one of the main characters, so her color is red, and I often see that certain characters always have a color that suits them the most. For example, Hell's Key, that has a lot to do with Enzo, so it's blue because I imagine he would see the color blue.
And the first one is quite dynamic with the greens in it. So that's kind of more earth tones, and it's where the story began with Hell's Daughter. Oh, that's very interesting to think about that. There's so much to consider when you're looking at the cover of a book. I know with this new cover, uh, you every time you look at it, you see something new that you hadn't noticed before. It's like a story, if you've read a story once or twice, the second time you might notice something you never noticed the first time around. But this cover is quite like that with the details that's in there. It's almost we should do a trivia quiz to see how many things do you notice inside the cover of each book. uh, do you write only fantasy? This is we published the fantasy series. Do you only write fantasy, Trinity-Rose?
I write mostly fantasy. I have tried to branch out and I tried to write a crime book once. I found that very difficult, and the things you have to Google for it is getting a bit suspicious. But I do enjoy trying to branch out to other genres, but fantasy is the one I focus on.
I know. I think when you are doing research for a book and you have to look up to how to kill somebody or the best poisons for it, you wonder who's going to be looking at your IP address.
Yes.
You want to do what? So crime is one of them, but fantasy, what is it about fantasy that you enjoy that pulls you towards fantasy more?
I think because it doesn't have to be realistic as such, because it gives you a whole new world that you can create for yourself. Because every fantasy world and every book is different, so it's entirely your own to create and do what you want with it.
So you are the ruler of your universe.
Yeah.
Nice place to be. Nice place to be. Do you have any plans for future books in a different series, fantasy, or are you just going to take a rest right now? Or do you have to write all the time? 3 points to questions.
Yeah, I was definitely planning on taking a break, but it just calls to me. I come up with an idea and my fingers just itch to write it. I'm currently trying to write a medieval kind of fantasy idea that I've got. I've only just started that one, so I'm very excited about creating all the new characters for it at the moment.
Oh, I love historical. And medieval is wonderful. There's some really good characters, and you can make it's such a rich story that people can visit that don't actually live in that time frame. So, ooh, we're looking forward to that one. What what advice, you started quite young, and uh, 12 writing, and then 16 you were published. What advice would you give to young writers out there who do desire to be published? What do you think is most important?
To just not give up, because it can get very difficult, especially after the first draft where you've come up with this idea, but then you've got to edit it to make it, good enough and for publishing, and it can kind of almost be a letdown. But you've just got to know it is worth it, and it's an amazing story. It just needs tuning up.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the editing process, I know that's developed over the last three books, and the process that we've followed for people, going in and reviewing it is. What advice would you give regarding the editing process to young writers? Because it's different for everybody. How does it affect your writing?
Well, the editing process can be different for every different book, really. So it's just finding the best fit for you, because we've obviously tried different editing processes for each book, and in the end, you find one that fits best for you and works well, and you kind of got to stick to that.
And that is very important, because working with an editor does make a difference, because we want it to be the very best book it can be. And you as a writer can only edit so much yourself, because sometimes writers will end up maybe editing out something that's quite important. And I think that's key for editors as well as writers to know that keep a folder with all the varying drafts, because in case there's an older draft that you might want to pull something out of. Have you done that at all? Had a draft where you edited something out and then you went back and ended up putting it back in?
We have actually, because it's sometimes you forget about certain things about their key importance, or they're important later in the book, because scenes can relate from the beginning and the end. So I think there was a scene that had an illustration or something, and it got deleted because the editor was like, this isn't necessarily important, and then we had to go back and add it back in because it did have an importance later on in the book.
Absolutely. And that's the key part, to have communication, have a strong communication going on between the author and the editor, and to have it work in an open communication, so that it's, yes, this will help it, no, and then to stand up for, no, this really does need to be in there. It's important, for the story, for the edits. So your book is releasing on the 28th. We're offering all kinds of specials, and we're getting it out on Instagram, and we're selling Hell's Sacrifice separately, but obviously we're selling the trilogy as a series, so it can sit right there in front of everybody. I have to say, the editors and other people that have read some of the drafts are so excited about it, and I know that it's really uh, an exciting time for you to have that there. But I have to say, I'm even more excited that you're continuing writing, and that you have to write, because it will, when you're as talented as you are, Trinity-Rose, and the books are out there, it's just, success is just waiting, for you. And I think that's true for other writers as well. So we're coming near to the end of the podcast, and it's always the point where I ask for this and put people on the spot. But Trinity-Rose, who would you like to do your shout out to?
I would love to shout out probably Holly, because she did all the illustrations, and making it come to life is just very incredible.
I think that's a great shout out because she is very, very talented. And from the children's books, but your series and the fact that she does the covers and the illustrations and all the details that are in there, I think that's a great one. I would like to do my shout out is to young writers to do what Trinity-Rose advises. Stick to it, believe in your story, and don't give up. And if there's writer's block, you walk away from things, but come back. And remember, age does not quantify talent and creativity. So it doesn't matter if you're 5, 15, or 50, or 150. Creativity can come at any point in time, and it just happened to come to you a little bit earlier, Trinity-Rose. Thank you for joining us today, and we're looking forward to the release. And I will say, this is Michèle from Dasami Bookworm Podcast, wishing you all a sunny day.